And we're live. Welcome everybody to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, June 9th, 2021. We will be following along in the agenda that was posted in issue 396. I'll copy and paste that issue here in chat. If you haven't already, feel free to add yourself to the meeting notes doc that was also copied and pasted into the chat. We'll be adding notes in there. Thank you, Roy, for agreeing to and helping out with taking notes today. And yeah, just wanted to quickly acknowledge that we do have a code of conduct that we ask folks to please abide by in these calls. You can go check it out. It's linked in the issue that I shared there. The general overall sentiment is that please be kind, please allow other folks to talk and raise your hand if you'd like to respond or comment. And we ask the same also in the RFC's repo itself, that we try to keep things civil and hopefully progress things forward as a community. In terms of announcements, I just want to quickly note, we took a bit of a break, hiatus last couple of weeks. OpenJS World was last week. You can find the presentations and talks that were done last week on the OpenJS Foundation YouTube channel if you want to go check those out. I know a few folks on this call participated in those sessions and thought it was a great event. So just want to give a shout out to that. Also, if you've been keeping up to date with the NPM CLI releases, we've been cutting pretty much consistently a release on Thursdays, the most recent of which went out last Thursday. I believe it was V716. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, CLI team. And we've been landing and sort of finished off making our subcommands workspace aware, which we're really proud of, and the team has been working really hard on. So if you haven't been playing with our workspace implementation, now's the time to go check it out and give it a run, give us some feedback. We want to know, your thoughts and feelings, and hopefully we can improve and have a best-in-class experience there. So did anybody else have any other announcements they wanted to share? If not, then we'll dive right into the agenda as we had it in that issue. The first item we have is issue number 395, the RFC that Roy put together for NPM add. I'll give you the floor, Roy, if you want to speak to this a bit, and I can take some notes.
Sure, thank you. Basically this RFC here is not yet a proper RFC, but I would say it's somewhat a continuation of 325, which was a way to run pre-install and post-install scripts when adding new dependencies to your project. So it somehow it tries to solve that same problem. But I'm also tying it to a separate problem space I've seen happening a lot, which is basically NPM users confusing just the pure reification, just a simple NPM install, with the act of adding a dependency. So maybe we're adding a dependency at a different version. Maybe you're just adding dependency at latest. And users get totally confused about that. It's more anecdotal evidence than an actual item in this issue here. But one of the things I've seen, things along the lines of users being confused. NPM install will install from my lock dependencies from a package lock. Oh, but look, I just did an NPM install and it updated my package lock. I don't understand what's going on. So it turns out you go see what happened was just that the user was NPM install a dependency at latest, and updating the current version of that dependency in the tree does updating the package lock. And the users are confused. To them, it's all NPM install. So it should be all the same. So somehow it's more of a user experience, maybe the user is expecting something that is not the actual thing happening. So my hope here is to tie that basically having an npm add, which will be a more focused experience or syntax to add two dependencies to a project, just being more explicit about the action happening there. And at the same time, try to provide that missing link of a lifecycle script, which is something that we ourselves are missing right now in the npm client. We wanted to be able to run a script after we add or update a dependency in our own npm client repo. This is something that we're missing right now. So kind of tying the two problem spaces into like trying to come up with a single elegant solution for both of them. So that's pretty much the idea here. I would appreciate any feedback. It is just an initial idea, or RFC. If turns out it's something that we want to move forward with, then I'll make sure to put together a proper RFC. Yeah. Any thoughts, comments?
I mean, the only thing that I think we already talked about internally was just the fact that npm add today is an alias for npm install. So this change, if we did add this command, would have to probably happen in V8, unless we somehow change. You're saying no, Gar? You want to speak to that?
No, this is really add and install would cross call each other in the right circumstances. We would implement this now in a backwards compatible way to start going down this road of thinking of them separately. And we even, like in our discussions, talked about reify and add being the only two, and install doesn't really make any sense anymore, but that's outside the scope here. But we would implement it so where if you just npm install foo, that's really npm add foo. And if you just do npm add, that's really npm install. So it's backwardly compatible, but we're starting this language of separating what we think about them as. And we can log deprecation warnings, but yeah, this is something we could implement in 7, no problem. This would not be a breaking change.
So I have a question. What would probably be a breaking change though is, I mean, as I understand it, isn't this going toward the direction of, I want to add, like I have a dependency on foo and it's not installed, right? I have an empty node modules tree. I want a way to add bar as a dependency and not reify foo. So right now, if you do npm install bar, it'll say, cool, I'll add bar to the list of things that need to be reified and then reify, but foo will also get installed. So this doesn't check that box, right? Because that would be a breaking change, like, and that is different from yarn add, where yarn add is explicitly add this one thing and only this one thing. And if there's anything else missing, just ignore it.
Yeah. That would have to be the breaking change behavior would have to come in a breaking change, but I think we can get started down this path without the breaking change, if that makes sense.
So then the benefit here is we have two separate commands. Maybe we rename install no args to npm reify, or we leave it as npm install. That's a question for another day. And we have npm add, which requires that you give it an argument.
Still sounds like it's a breaking change to npm add.
Well,
right?
if we make that a requirement, right? And we could say,
yeah.
If you run npm add with no args, we could have a deprecation notice that says, hey, in V8 add has to take an argument, whatever. So the fullness of time, we have npm add some argument and npm install no arguments. What is the, when I'm trying to kind of just zero in on them is like a kind of clear articulation of like what the benefit is of that versus one install command that can be used for both purposes. I guess there's anecdata that people are confused about either it can take args or not. There is not this use case, or at least we're not considering adding the use case of adding exactly one thing and not reifying the rest of the tree. So is it just the lifecycle hook that we're kind of, I mean, well, like tangible user benefit?
Yeah, I also mentioned one more thing in the RFC here. I think might be beneficial is the fact that npm add, the alias we have today, is really lightly documented. There's like a single bullet point in the npm install page that refers to it.
It's just an
Yeah, if it becomes a proper command, then it gets its own documentation page, right? And then we explain about also the add lifecycle scripts, and it becomes more prominent, right? Like people can actually find about it, and so I think it's more about the syntax, really. Like it's not any functional change if we don't introduce the difference between simply reifying that single dependency, like you mentioned. Right.
Right, because I think that I'm kind of torn. Like on the one hand, it would be nice to be able to say, I just want to add this one dep and I don't want to reify the rest of the tree. That's a thing that people have asked for, right? And there was kind of this weird backdoor way to do it in npm v6 if you just deleted your lock file. But it was never really the intent. And npm add foo kind of, like we could leave them as two separate commands where npm install foo adds foo to the list and does a full reify, and npm add foo just adds foo and only reifies foo in its steps. Like that could be a long-term place we want to try to head.
I see ZB, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so these are probably minor things, but just to bring them up in the context, if the decision is to make npm add the only way of installing a single package in the future, you probably need to take into account that almost every package in their README has a section that says you install it by typing npm install name of the package. So I don't think the ecosystem would ever update that. That's one thing. Another comment from my point of view, reify. I would not advise to take that one as an official command because, well, I'm not a native speaker of English, and I would have trouble remembering what that does. So maybe another name.
I mean, I speaking as English as a first language, I also don't know what that word means outside of like looking it up every time it comes up.
If you're not like eyeballs deep in package management and build tooling, I could see how you never would have heard the word reify. Compilers all use it. It's a very technical term, which we probably don't want people to have to know.
Yeah.
It's the term that Arborist uses because that's at that point you're eyeballs deep in package management. Welcome.
Yeah.
Yes. Gar, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, just trying to think through because like we know where we want to get to, and this RFC is trying to push us in that direction. Even if the net benefit isn't much here, is there value in starting to separate these terms? Even if npm install foo always eventually just aliases to add foo under the hood and we never break that, that's fine. And even if for now npm add foo doesn't add only foo, like is this a good beginning to like starting this fork down the road? Why, I guess more like, why shouldn't we do this?
Well, I think that question, if essentially what you described from a user-facing point of view is it's exactly the same as what we have now, right? Because effectively add remains, add does a full reify, install can take an argument and calls add does a full reify and calls install, or if it doesn't get any. From a user point of view, there's no change, right? They're effectively aliases to one another still. The benefit then is really kind of just an internal refactoring, if anything. It's like, well, we can clean up the code if we have these two different code paths living in two different files or whatever. And that's kind of like, we don't need an RFC to do that. We can just do it. But I think where it gets interesting for our purposes here is if there is going to be some net kind of user change. And I think and that's kind of what I was asking about the the lifecycle hook, right? So if the lifecycle hook for add is going to happen every time you add a package, well, then the question is it only when you're adding a new package? Does it happen for updates? Like there's a bunch of these kind of like little fine points that we can dig into, and they probably should be in a proper RFC. None of them are particularly hard to answer, and I think that it's okay. Like that's definitely a user benefit. I still think that we should probably have a broader like mutation event, and mutation is another one of these words like reify that is totally sensible when you are eyeballs deep in package management, and probably a lot of users would think we're talking about the X-Men.
I think those two things are separate, right? Like because in this proposal or in this like topic, I think we're speaking to pre-add and post-add in terms of like you running the command, right? Like versus what I think you're speaking to, which is the lower level like actual mutation events that like we want people to eventually be able to plug into, right? So it just happens to be that the name of the command will be add, and so you'll be able to do pre-add and post-add, and it's like only pre-add and post-add when you're running this command. Like that's the lifecycle events.
Wait, it is still a breaking change though.
Yeah,
even what Gar suggested is still a breaking change, because the lifecycle event name in the environment for install scripts is going to be changing from install to add.
Yeah.
If we make that the new top level command.
Yeah.
So I think, sorry.
Go ahead.
That I think might be less disruptive. I mean,
yeah, that's a pretty
because
narrow
that's a different scenario than everyone out there says type npm install. People reacting to life cycle is probably going to be a little easier. But I think to your point, yeah, this is solving the one problem of like, how do we have an event when the user said, I want to add this package to my tree, right?
Right.
Ignore the fact that right now we do more than that. The event, we're hooking into the fact that the user asked to install this one thing. Yes, other things may be happening, but for now, we know one thing we can event on this one thing and fix everything else in 8.
What I meant was the npm_command environment variable.
Yes, I know. I was speaking to your previous point. It was a thought in my head that I wanted to.
Cool. Yeah, so I think there's not very many things that hook on npm command environment. The big one is usually publish versus something else in pre-published scripts. That's the only case I've seen people actually use that npm command name, and test runners that, well, tap, right, checks to see if the, oh no, that's the event lifecycle command. Yeah, it's not the npm command that almost anything is looking at. So I don't know I think that might be like a small enough breaking change that we can do it without a major time for a bump.
Oh, I have to admit, I did use post install for unusual stuff in my time, so it might not be that uncommon. I've seen a few usages, and I blocked it for a few cases where I didn't want to risk someone messing up my installation with some hacks. So it would probably be fairly easy to scan the registry and see how often it's being used.
Only for public packages. Private's quite a...
Yeah, but it's a number after all.
Yeah, it would give us some clue. It wouldn't be like definitive, but
yeah. So in terms of this, Roy, it does seem like there's enough like willingness to see this implemented to actually create an RFC, I think, for it. Yeah. So if you want to like take the next step of like turning this into that, then I think that's like a good next step. And then in terms of when it would actually land or when we would actually do this, I think that's a completely separate like topic, whether or not,
Yep, sounds great.
Cool. Moving on, I know I shuffled the order here a little bit. ZB, I know you poked me. We had this issue 371, which is sort of like a holding issue for the NPM audit resolver topic that we've been having for a couple of years at this point. I know you had the RFC, which is one of the oldest open RFCs that we've had, and we've made some progress in terms of moving the conversation forward in the package maintenance group, and now we've opened up a new collaboration space called the package vulnerability and reporting collaboration space in the OpenJS Foundation. We sort of kicked that off last week. But yeah, I wanted to give you the floor and give you some time to speak maybe a little bit about what your hopes are for next steps. I know we've talked about, and even previously, I know Adam Baldwin even was in big support of potentially pulling in some of the concepts in NPM Audit Resolver. Yeah, would love to just let you speak to this and questions that you've raised in this issue thread.
Okay, so a bit of background first. Most of you are aware of what Audit Resolver is, but the idea is twofold actually. There's one tool that's interactive and helps the end user make decisions about what to ignore, but it's very specific about how it's ignoring things, and it helps maintain how long the thing remains ignored for various reasons, and has a few other minor features. They generally help you make and store decisions about what you want to do with vulnerabilities reported in your packages audit. And that's mostly for end users. I don't think a lot of package authors are currently using this, but the collab space is intended to change that and move forward with something that would be usable for both end users and package maintenance. Other than that, there's a second tool that's simply wrapping around NPM audit and applying the decisions. So instead of running NPM audit, you run the wrapper I built, and your decisions that you want to ignore some specific instances of a package with a vulnerability are taken into account, and effectively it exits 0 more often, simply put. So that's been working with NPM 6, starting from 6.1, I think, or something like that. And now NPM 7 has been a major change for me. And I have a branch ready. I even made a release candidate with NPM 7 support, but there's a bunch of things missing in there. Because the biggest issue is that there's much less output from NPM 7 in the audit. And the key item for me is the via field, or whatever American pronunciation of that is. And that means it gives me a graph where I can go through the graph and find out where in the dependency tree the package is located before everything deduplicates and stuff. So I can let the user decide, and this is one of the most important features of Audit Resolver. I can let the user decide that they want to ignore these specific instances of the package, but if the package becomes a dependency of their other dependency all of a sudden, they will have to look at it again and decide if this use case can also be ignored. Like so they, by ignoring a regular expression denial of service somewhere irrelevant, they don't later introduce it somewhere else where it's become a dependency of a server component. So with that, I really need to figure out the path again. So we used to have path in NPM 6, and now I have to rebuild it from the graph of via fields. And this generally works, but the prerequisite to that is I need to NPM ls depth 0 to figure out what's an actual dependency that someone pulled in, instead of taking all of them as potential top-level dependencies. So ask number 1, fairly simple. would be an indication that says either a depth field or an indication that something is a direct dependency from the current package JSON in the output of npm audit -- JSON command. So that's my ask number one, which would remove the necessity to run npm-ls for npm 7. So does that thing sound reasonable? Like how? So my overall question is, how willing are you to add to the output in npm audit?
So I mean that's fine. It's just adding to the data that gets generated in that audit report. But we would have, at the time that we're generating that report, we would have all of the nodes that depend on the particular node that we're showing there. One thing might be challenging though, because we do deduplicate. You may have something at node modules / trim, which is depended upon by the root as well as a bunch of other stuff. But if all you care about is it a root dependency or not?
Yeah, that's what I care about. So I want to
then that would
take into account the root dependencies and then build paths for them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if it's not a breaking change, like you could probably just get your hands dirty in the code in Arborist that's generating this report, because it's or post an issue or a pull request like, hey, I need you to add this particular thing. We tried to make it straightforward so you could see what that is in as little with as little a challenge as possible, but let me see.
Yeah, I think I linked. Go ahead.
The most important fact for me here is you're okay with adding fields to the output. So yeah, I know how to report it. I'll look into making it a pull request instead. That's a nice detail to add. So that's good. I've got two more items. One is possibly also fairly simple. It might already be an easy way to do there. So I need to be able to tell if something's a dev dependency or a production dependency. npm audit used to have that information, like it would say if it's a dev dependency, if it's an optional bundle, etc. So I don't really care much about the optional and bundled use cases, but highlighting the difference between direct dependency for production and a dev dependency is kind of useful for my end users in Audit Resolver. So I was thinking if there's a way to look it up easily,
yeah,
other than just pulling in package JSON.
One thing that might be a little bit tricky, let's say you have multiple nodes that are subject to a particular vulnerability. Each of those will have potentially different things that are depending upon them, right? So one of them, and it may even be the case that one of them is production and one of them is dev. So
that's why it's not as obvious as just pulling in the package JSON and looking it up. So I need that for each path. I need to figure out if that path is in production or dev dependencies.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know how to approach that.
So yeah, we're gonna have to capture that information into the audit report when we have it handy, right? Which we do in Arborist when we're generating the report. So that's not particularly hard. We just kind of need to be thoughtful about how best to put it there. The design of this thing initially was just like, what is a reasonable kind of human readable report that is a little bit less noisy and
Mhm.
more actionable than the previous human readable report. And then we kind of built the data model up to just do that.
Yeah.
And so the thing you mostly care about is like what's actually vulnerable, why is it vulnerable, and can I fix it or not?
The information, if it's a dev dependency or not, is, in my opinion, the only important information you removed.
Yeah,
Add
I mean,
that back.
yeah,
We
we
could add that
do.
back through a type, right?
Yeah, well, it's sort of. I mean, for each vulnerable node, it can be, any combination of dev optional, dev optional, but not strictly dev or strictly optional, like all of the flags. Yeah, and either bundled or not. Although usually when it's bundled, we do tell you, like, we do actually specify in the report, like, you have to upgrade this thing in order to get out of the potential of getting a bundled vulnerable version. But
Oh, that I didn't know. Gonna have to find an example of that.
Roy, I see your hands up.
I was just going to suggest to the specific topic of NPM audit resolver, if maybe using NPM explain is something that could provide an extra info. So internally just, but I don't know, Isaac, if NPM explain will actually provide the type info in a reliable way.
yeah, it does. It'll tell you if something is dev or a workspace or what have you.
Yeah, so
But then again, can I use it on? Oh, okay. I remember what the explain returns, and I should be able to use it, but only in the interactive part, because I'm not sure if I want to call npm explain on every single thing I go through in the check option, but yeah, that might not be necessary. Okay, I'll look into it. That could be helpful.
npm explain --json is like npm explain package name -json is I mean, that gives you every instance of it, every dependency, its kind of path back to the root project or a workspace.
Yeah, I remember looking up the output for the purpose of just identifying the top level, but it was too much, so I went with ls. But that could be useful here. Okay, and one last thing is about fixing. So npm audit resolver used to have a feature where you could decide to fix the specific vulnerability, and it would record the fact that these paths were fixed before, and if someone installed the old versions again by dropping the package lock, for example, and regenerating it in an unfortunate way, you would get notified about it, that this is not only vulnerable, but it was also fixed before, so you could investigate. And individual fixing is no longer exposed at all. So there's
there were some pretty significant problems with the way that we had the server kind of tell you what to update and how to fix it. Obviously, npm audit resolver kind of addressed some of that by having the user pick what version they want to fix it to. But I think potentially a solution here might be to have npm audit resolver create an override rule in the package JSON file. Because then that could say, look, if you have this particular path to, some module to Lodash version, whatever version range, I want it to be replaced with this other version range instead. And then even
I think it's not exactly what that was meant to do. So the idea is to do the same thing npm audit fix would do, but record what was fixed. So I have two approaches now. One is to dig up npm audit fix and reuse parts of that code in audit resolver.
You won't be happy.
Or just run npm audit fix -- JSON and ask you to provide in the output what was fixed, or scan what changed and try to use that as input, and then just mark everything as fixed in bulk.
Right. So the way that fix works right now is we create a list of all of the nodes that are marked as vulnerable. All right. So we get the internally in Arborist. None of this is actually handled in the npm CLI anymore. Internally within Arborist, we get the list of all the things that are vulnerable. We get the report, and then we identify all of those. We have the identification of all of those nodes that are vulnerable. Then essentially we reevaluate all of those for a new dependency match, right? So we effectively we ignore the lock file for those particular nodes within the tree, and we reevaluate them. And because we start with the kind of nearest meta vulnerability to the root project, we're able to kind of steer around the vulnerable versions, and we can determine at the time of generating the report, we know whether or not we're going to be able to do that. We just do a best effort, and we end up fixing what we determined was fixable. So there isn't really a what we could do is add a way somehow in npm audit fix to say, okay, npm audit fix, but I only want you to fix these ones, right? That would be possible, but there isn't a way to say only apply this fix in this way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so either selecting which ones to fix, or output that says which were fixed in the JSON output, because I could use that, and I think it would be an upgrade for the end user, because they would run the fix once. No one really wants to decide if they're fixing or not unless it's a breaking change, so a major version bump. That's something to investigate further. But if we could just run the fix on everything and save the result in the resolve JSON file, that would be okay, because it's not important which exact packages someone decided to fix. It's important to mark that they were fixed before. So I would be happy with npm audit fix just giving me the list of fixed paths as output.
Yeah, this kind of gets back to our an issue that we have that's kind of a long-ish standing issue. It's a UX shortcoming where if you run, for example, if you run npm find dupes, that's supposed to run dedupe in a dry run mode and then tell you what the duplicates are. But our kind of final stage in the reify process doesn't know that it was a dry run. So it just says, oh, well, I updated 3 packages and removed 2 and added 1, but I'm not going to tell you what they are, and I didn't actually do it. So it's not very useful. So I think what we kind of need here is a way to tell npm to output the actual diff of the trees. What were the set of steps that we did in a very, very verbose way. And if you're running in dry run, we do that by default, because presumably, it's not helpful to tell you if we didn't actually do it, that it just give you a summary output. If we did actually do it, you maybe don't care. It's if you want to see what changed, you can diff your package lock, right? And it's fine. So I think that functionality, Arborist is already making that available, and the CLI is just sort of not doing anything with it.
So
Okay. Action
is
point.
that an action? Sorry, go ahead, ZB.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask if I can consider that an action point, or should I make it an issue on the CLI repository to request that? What's the next step?
I would make it a describe your use case in a CLI feature request to say that you want the diff data to be made available somehow. And then we can take it from there. And then it's just a question of like, what is the flag that we use to say always dump the diff? What are the cases where we show it by default?
Okay.
I would say if we're doing a dry run install, we probably always want to show the diff, because otherwise, what are you doing? Right? But there could be some option to, forcibly always show it.
Okay, I have 3 actions, I think. One, and if you're okay, ZB, with taking them all, it seems like one, there's a PR that if you want to go dig into Arborist itself and update the audit report and add the information that you're missing, it seems like we would be open to reviewing that and adding.
I think I might have skimmed this file already before.
Okay. But adding essentially back in some sort of like top level flag or type information, like our depth information that you're looking for, we can review like a PR on that. And then there's the investigate takeaway, I guess, for you to investigate npm explain JSON or npm audit when we're essentially resolving a vulnerability. And then the ask that you'll have of us is to essentially show diff information.
Yeah. One bit, npm explain was supposed to help with figuring out if it's a dev dependency or not for each path, not about vulnerabilities per se.
Yeah, npm explain gives you all the metadata you could want about each of those.
I can edit the notes.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, feel free. By the way, anybody always feel free to edit our notes. They are.
Yeah, especially if you see your name, go check if what I wrote there actually makes sense.
Roy and myself do our best to note sentiment, it's not a one-to-one of what you've said in a call, so apologize if we are paraphrasing quite often. So is that good, ZB? Do you feel like there's action items there? We can move on.
Yeah, sure. That's
cool.
That's a good path forward.
Awesome. So moving on, we have Isaac. You have PR 375.
Yeah, this is still pending some work. I was supposed to get to it this week, but instead I'm fixing a pretty gnarly pure depths bug. Yeah, where we left this, just briefly in summary, this PR that I wrote and the PR that Vincent wrote about pure mode are going to be split up into 3. The first being a definition of kind of what is shared by default, what is not shared by default across workspaces and just across dependencies in general. The second is the way that you specify that something is to be shared if it would not normally be, or is not to be shared if it would normally be. And the third is the implementation of how we isolate those depths.
Any other updates on that?
No.
Can I remove the agenda label then
Yes,
from this?
please.
Because
okay. I'll put it back when there's something to actually talk about.
Cool. This next one we've had on the radar for a while. PR 364, restore npm 6 ability to install one package. This is basically npm add, which Roy sort of alluded to, I believe. Or this is, yeah, I think this is pretty much that, right? We would imagine that npm add would essentially provide this mechanism.
Yeah,
or,
like I said, it's a little bit of misnamed PR, because this was only the behavior in v6 if there was no package lock JSON file. And by default, there is a package lock JSON file. And the intent in npm6 was to always have a fully realized tree, fully reified tree. And I don't know which word to use. If we're going to add it, then we kind of need that to be somehow an opt-in feature. And I wouldn't want to make it the default for npm install foo to only install foo. Like it's the hazards are not really worth that. But yeah, I mean, if we decide that the spelling of that's what npm add foo does, is it just adds foo and nothing else, that's pretty straightforward. There's definitely some care to be taken in how we do that, how breaking it is, at which point it's breaking, if we, put deprecation notices ahead of npm version 8 or whatever.
Well, I'm muted. Sorry. Can I link these two essentially? npm add and this install one package?
I mean, I'm not sure, like if we think that the long-term goal of npm add is to address this use case, then yes, that's exactly the right thing to do. If we decide that the long-term goal of npm add is just internal code cleanup and a new lifecycle hook, well, then it doesn't really satisfy the request here. So it's kind of, I think we need to answer that question first.
Okay. So leave this open for now then?
Yeah, and there could also be some net new, config flag or something that is like only install this one particular version, or only install this one particular node in the tree. Don't install anything else. The implementation of that in Arborist is pretty straightforward. We already do that for global packages and for workspaces. So allowing that to just be some arbitrary path is totally doable. It's really just a matter of kind of figuring out the UX and then specifying it.
Let's leave it open and we can maybe discuss changing or modifying the RFC or asking the individual to update it with maybe the option, like you say, to like introduce a net new flag to get that behavior back. Okay, moving on, because I want to get through these 343 npm workspaces auto switching context based on the current working directory. Roy, is there any update on this?
Well, I still see confused users. I was working on another issue this week, another confused user that wanted to npmls inside a workspace directory, and oh, it's not working. Everything's it's missing. What's going on? So yeah, but I don't remember where we left it up last time we discussed this RFC. I remember there was the idea of making it an opt-in by adding another configuration to basically make sure that if you're running from a workspace directory, it should actually refer to the project root and run it from there. So yes, do anyone remember what was the outcome last time?
Another way that this like what is shared across dependencies RFC might address this is we could just put the symlinks in all of those workspace roots, right? So that when you CD into that folder and you run npmls, we'll say, yeah, you're getting this from outside your project. Yeah. And then we don't have to have any like magic walk up the file tree.
Okay, so in terms of, go ahead.
I was just going to point that even though maybe, that might do it for our last, but maybe for some other commands might need more. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe
I mean, install is the one that, is going to always be the biggest hazard there, right? Because.
Right.
Yeah, I think where we landed on this last time we discussed it is like, we really can't do this without a very explicit way to say like your workspace root is here.
Yep. Yeah, I think this was Jordan's idea of the file or something pointing back towards the workspace root.
Yeah.
And so for me, I totally agree that that's like a way that you opt into this, but just how you set those up, I would want like the ergonomics of that to be like really simple. So like if we introduce some sort of like subcommand, like workspace subcommand, like WS or something to eventually help manage workspace specific config in the future, like I could imagine that something could live under there to like set up those links or set up those files for you. I just want to make it easy. So you do like an npm init -w and then the workspace name, but then you want to like link that or make sure that it's like set up properly. Like there's got to be like a way to opt into that somehow to generate that file for you, so you don't have to do that manually. But that's just my 2 cents on like if we went that with that approach and we supported, you know, you opting in by having a file that points back to where the workspace root is. I just want to make sure that's easy to actually generate that through like the CLI.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We got about 8 minutes left. I know Nilf is not here. Tierney, did you want to give maybe a quick update if there is any on the licenses?
Yep. Just tiny update. I did the dependency, the PR to licensee, the dependency update there to get it in a shape where I was comfortable PRing it in. So I believe I'm going to end up figuring out if I can pair with someone from the NPM team in the next month-ish or so, like in June, to get that going, to get work done on that. So,
and thank you. And then I don't think that they're here. Nilf isn't here, and unfortunately, looks like the person who created the group update packages by dependency type isn't here, but I know Gil, I think you've been on, or Jill, you've been on the call. I apologize, we didn't give you more time here, but I wanted to give you the last 5-10 minutes, but we got to speak to the RFC 386. Maybe you can just give an overview of that.
Yeah, sure. Hi. So I saw optional peer dependencies, and I assumed that it would do a bit more than it does. So my assumption was that if you have an optional peer dependency and the consuming project has that dependency installed, you would still get a warning if it's the incorrect version. But turns out that it just turns off warnings completely, which doesn't seem that helpful to me. So I think it should check the version and it should give you a warning if it's an incorrect version, but remain silent if it's not installed. That's pretty much it. So yeah, initially I said that we should have an extra option in the configuration, but somebody else commented that Yarn does it the way I'm suggesting. What I was trying to avoid was a breaking change, but I think a breaking change would be better to change the existing behavior of the optional peers so that you still get an error if it's installed.
You should get an error if it's got a conflicting version.
I would really hesitate to say that you're wrong, but in my experience, that's not what happens.
Yeah,
it might be a bug. Yeah.
There's frequently bugs in my code. I wouldn't be too surprised, but definitely the intent is if you have a peer optional, the contract is if you have a peer optional dep, we're not going to put it there by default, but if there is a version that's there, we will verify, we'll make sure that it's not a different version. It's not a conflicting version.
Okay, so I've only tried it in NPM 6, so I don't know what happens in NPM 7.
In NPM 6, it just doesn't put peer versions of any kind, and it doesn't check them, and it doesn't do anything with them. So yes, what you're describing is correct.
I did have a look at the PR that implemented the optional peers, but maybe it's changed since then, and it seemed to just turn the warning off. But I've not tried it in NPM 7, so I might be talking rubbish.
No, you are speaking the absolute truth. I was getting it wrong. I didn't realize you were talking about 6. So yes, in 6 you're correct. It would just not warn you if it was missing, which was, I guess, a little bit nicer, because it wasn't telling you to go install it. But in 7, it will actually crash the install if there's a conflicting peer optional in that level in the tree, and if there's no way for it to like get you a correct version for your peer optional dep. So I think maybe what you're requesting is what we've done. You're welcome.
Yeah, it seems like that might be the case. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll encourage my team to upgrade to npm 7.
Yeah, that would be probably the way to go. I think the only thing is the only thing that we actually do with peer dependencies meta, and it's kind of a rather baroque way to go about specifying this, is we just check optional true or false. And if it's not there, then we don't, we treat it as a regular peer. But if it is specified as a peer dep or an optional peer dep, we do try to verify that it has this working contract. Now, in the cases of conflicting peer dependencies where we have something, that just cannot be resolved because you have a bunch of stuff that has peer deps and there's no kind of way that we can find an overlap between them. There is some heuristics there to keep people from just being broken by this. So there's a strict mode where we say any conflicts we crash. But the default is if it's yours, if it's like a conflict between two of your dependencies, then we'll crash on it. If it's a conflict that happens, two or more layers down the tree of the dependency graph, we'll print a warning, but like, we're not going to get in your way of getting your job done. And if you do -- force, we'll just accept the broken setup. And there's always the legacy peer deps solution, which just goes back to npm v6 style and does not look at peer relationships at all.
Okay, right. Thanks for your help. I'll go back and reconsider. Thanks very
Cool.
much.
Yep.
Yeah, just confirm that it's actually the case as well, Jules. So
don't take me
if
at my
it's
word
not,
ever.
Yeah. If it's not working, feel free to poke us either in a bug on the CLI repo, or just come back to the RFC and comment back on it yourself as well. So, but appreciate you adding that. So, and joining the call as well.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, apologize that we got to you last.
That's okay.
But it was nice seeing the pets go by, I think.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Anything else from folks? I know we skipped over one or two RCs, but hopefully we'll get to them next week. Give updates there. I quickly added a note about the RC for the where config. I think we are just at the point of bug shedding the name. I don't think there's much pushback for that, making npm config and npm exec configurable in terms of where they are looking. Yeah, hopefully we can continue to have conversations async in the RC's repo itself, and appreciate everybody jumping on today in person. I'll see you next week. Cheers.
See ya.